This is Kelly.
And this is Amy.
And you're listening to Diary of a Death Investigator. We're doing our countdown to 50. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, honestly, I'm glad Kelly keeps track because I didn't even know we were that close, to be honest.
We started counting in the beginning, and I think we were just like, we don't need to count anymore. And then we were so close to 50 that I thought we should take the moment to appreciate it. 52, I guess, would be a year because I think we've put an episode out almost every week for the past since July. I think we maybe have missed 1 or 2 weeks just because we were sick or something was going on. But
yeah, speaking of, I was on my deathbed for the last week and I was revived. But I was just going to tell Kelly that when I was in my stupor of sickness, I literally had dreams about saging my house, trying to get these demons out of my house that were making me sick. And I was like, when I woke up, I was like, did I actually do this or was I dreaming about this? Because I know that we've talked about it on this podcast before because I was like, maybe I really do need to do this. So...
Well, there's a chance that Amy might be moving, so maybe you won't have to do that in this house. Maybe you can do it in a new house. That's
depends.
funny.
It depends on my job, right? It could be a whole new set of demons. So
That's true. That's funny that you talked about sage because so while I was in Coachella, my coworker and I were talking about how we need to get our minds right and how we need to like detox our bodies. So over a glass of rosé, she and I were looking at this detox program it's called The Sanctuary. And we ended up ordering the kit. And so it's supposed to help like detox parasites. And I know I might have been bamboozled. We'll see. But it's supposed to be life-changing, 10 days. Every person I've seen online has said that they are not affiliated with them. They just really think that the cleanse is totally worth it. But anyway, long story short, the box contains a thing of sage.
So after your cleanse, when you get your demons out, you can sage your house to, rid them. Make sure you open the window to air it out so they have somewhere to go. So
maybe I'll just like, it is like a whole, I don't know, what is this? Like 4 inches of sage or something. But I'd never had it. So I was like, what is this? It looks
so funny. Yeah, because not all of them smell very good. I think it would be funny to like start a brand of sage and just call it Poof Beyond.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll let you know if it's life-changing. And then hopefully it is life-changing, but I do want to do a podcast about parasites or whatever and see.
I've read this book by Grady Hendrix, and there is one particularly about this girl that goes through this purge, and, it was demons with worms, so.
Oh, baby.
Yeah. It's a scary story, so there you go. I don't know. I think I've told you about watching autopsies where I've seen, I think maybe one that was like tapeworms, but really anything that talks about like worms that I can attest to would be, like maggots. So not always pleasant experiences either.
Maybe like this is also some sort of not just parasites, but it's like buildup of like this mucus and stuff. So we'll see. I'm hopeful and excited, and so is my coworker. She is very excited. So
you're excited to poop your guts out?
Yes. We have a lot of things in our system to get out. So we'll see. So we're going to call this episode.
Yay.
Well, it's episode 42, and we're going to call It Could Have Been a Agatha Christie.
And for those of you that are young that don't know who Agatha Christie is, she's a really great murder mystery writer. So,
and the reason that we are doing this particular episode is because we got a message on our Instagram page and they wanted to know what your favorite case was. Or like most interesting case.
Yeah. So, and I will preface this with, I don't know if I necessarily have like a quote favorite case. I've had lots of cases that I've really liked that were super interesting. I think a lot of my favorite cases have been cases where I've worked with people that I've really liked So a lot of law enforcement agencies where I got along well with the detectives because, like I've said before, like a lot of these cases are really hard to work. So sometimes you have to like find the humor in like some of those cases, or like working with coworkers that I really liked where we could like laugh about it after. Some of the detectives that I really like to work with that I worked a lot with for the first 3 or 4 years, I worked a lot of homicides with them. And actually one of them was the father of one of my supervisors. And so that was always fun when we got to work like scenes together with him and his dad, because they were like literally like twins. And so it was funny to watch them kind of bicker with each other. And they actually would go to lunch with us sometimes. Or I remember after one scene, like they took me to breakfast, and because we had been on this scene for like, I don't know, 6 hours. And so it was like, oh, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. You get off at 7. Like, we know you have to be back at the office for your morning lineup meeting. Like, we'll just treat you to breakfast. And so that was really nice. But it was always really funny when you show up to like a really nasty scene, and like homicide detectives, they wear really nice suits. So you see them show up to these really gross scenes, and they would like be at the doorway, and they're like, yeah, you can go in on your own. And they're like, just report back to us. And sometimes they would brave it and like put on like a Tyvek suit and like walk in with us. But you could sometimes hear them go, because they're like, you know, trying to like choke down like throw up or something. But even some of them, they'd be like in outdoor scenes and they don't like bugs. And so one of them, I can remember him like standing like up on a log, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm trying to stay away from the bugs. I'm like, because bugs can't crawl up logs, like, and like insects fly. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's not going to stop them from getting to you. So yeah, I'll say like we had some good memories doing that. And even back when we were allowed to have fun in our earlier years under different supervision, we would pull pranks on each other. We had, oh, what are they called? They have like a certain name to them. They're like these dummies that we would use for training. I don't know if it was like Timmy or something like that, but we would like dress him up, and we would get the keys of one of our coworkers, and we'd put it in the passenger seat or like in the back seat. And we'd watch from like the window and wait for them to get into their car after like their long shift. And we'd watch them freak out. So we would do that kind of stuff all the time. So those are like the kind of things that I remember. Those like made scenes or days like my favorite. So I had a lot of scenes that were like that, because I think it's kind of, I don't know, would it be like, oh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? To say like a scene of like a death is your favorite, I don't know. Seems kind of
insensitive.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the thing. I think I learned like a scene where I was like, wow, that was probably the most interesting scene. So I guess this one was one that I could say was very much one that was like, oh, wow, that's something that you could see like being a TV show or being like a book or a story. So it just so happened that I had all of these crazy scenes while I was training. It was a very ideal training for me. I will say it just happened that I got all these crazy things when I was training. And maybe that's because when you're training, you're with someone else. So you're getting like double the calls. So during this time, I think I had been an investigator at this point for not even 2 months, maybe 3 months. And so I get this call, and it's at night, and this woman had been found or pronounced deceased in the early evening. And she's an elderly woman in her 80s. And this woman, as far as we know, she's just found pronounced dead in her home, in her bedroom. And so I do not know really much of anything other than it looks like a home invasion, and she's just deceased. They can't really tell us why, because they're not moving the body. And so we also appreciate that as well, because we don't want them to compromise the position of where she is, because that can change the whole scene for us. And so we get to the scene, and of course CSI is there, and they've already processed the majority of the scene already when we get there. And when we get into this house, it's mostly cluttered, but it's pretty tidy, in as much as like an elderly person would keep it. Like, it's pretty clean, like dusted, but there's like neat little piles of things.
Like knickknacks?
Yes, exactly.
I know. The collectibles.
Yeah. And of course she has a cat. And so she has like little cat figurines and stuff as well in there.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be me. That's me. It is me.
It's future Kelly. So
I collect cat figurines from all over the world. So any place that I visit, I have a cat from there.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, it's a look into your future.
Well, hopefully not too far into my future.
Well, hopefully this isn't you, actually, but because this was terrible. So walk into the house, of course I see this, and I'm like trying not to bump into anything, because of course they're all like glass little figurines. And the front door, like you can see straight through the living room, and like the door of her living room, it leads straight to the back door into her backyard, and it's a glass sliding door. And the glass sliding door was left open. And so I'm thinking like it was open because CSI had like been in and out of there. I don't really know why. And I do see some like blood droplets on the tile floor. So I'm just like, okay. So looking at that, and then I see a whole bunch of like cat food like scattered across the floor, which is also weird. And so I'm just kind of like looking at
in piles, or like, so when you say, okay, so I'm thinking, did someone kick over cat food, or is it like someone just opened a bag and like threw cat food everywhere?
Yeah. So actually it was knocked over, not just in one place, but in another place over by the back door. So I was getting to that actually.
Oh, sorry.
So we're like walking through the living room, and yeah, you do see like to the left, there was kind of one of those refillable food bowls. That was like a standing one, and that had been kicked over. And so there was a pile there that was kicked over. And then like you continue to walk through there, and that's where you kind of see like the like coffee table had been moved, and then like the couch had been kind of moved. And then you see like a big bag of cat food, and that had been knocked over as well. And that was right next to the back door. And we continued into the kitchen, and that's kind of where like the detectives and stuff were at. And they were looking at stuff like in the kitchen. And we were asking them where the decedent was at, and they said in the back room, but like CSI was still back there taking pictures. And they were talking about stuff that was actually like in the sink. And we're like, oh, is that why there's like a trail of like droplets in the sink? And they're like, well, that's part of it. And so they're like, we haven't looked at her, of course, yet, but yeah, this is kind of weird. And we're like, well, why? So they said, well, first, let's kind of tell you what the story is here. An elderly lady lives here. She has like food delivered to her by like one of those like companies.
Oh, yeah, like Meals on Wheels or something like that.
Yeah. And so they realized it wasn't like her to not answer the door. I think it was like after a day. And they're like, this is kind of weird. And I'm sure it's probably happened before, like maybe have a welfare check done on her. And so they came to check on her, of course, made entry through the front door. And then they actually saw that the back door was still wide open. And so like, oh, this isn't good. And they had found her deceased in the back bedroom. And so, of course, they knew that this was suspicious and called the cops. Well, there had been some other break-ins around this area too. And they kind of had an idea who like the suspect was. But they, especially like an elderly person, they didn't really think this looked so much as like an attempt of like a robbery or anything, because they didn't really find anything missing. So they, of course, they're like, why would they leave the back door open? Why would they knock over all suit? Obviously, they were like in a rush. So they're talking about like this trail of like these droplets like on the floor. And so, of course, it looks like blood. And I know we've talked about like blood spatter before, and there were like 90-degree droplets, like someone had been like walking with.
Ooh, I'm learning.
Exactly. So someone had been walking with whatever instrument they had been using or implement back to the kitchen, and they had put whatever it was in the sink. And so the thing is, though, that there was a can of tomato paste next to the sink, and it was empty, but there was a bunch of ceramic knives in the sink as well. And the tomato paste had been poured over all of the knives.
What does tomato paste do? I mean, other than make it all look like blood, what does it do?
Nothing.
Would it contaminate evidence then?
I mean, I think that was the overall objective of this person, like, to make it look like blood. And here, I'm going to try to deceive you all. Like, good luck figuring out which one could possibly be a murder weapon. I remember looking at this and I was like, this is really dumb, because I'm like, obviously, like, you can test blood droplets and you can test tomato paste and you can figure out, I mean, literally, you can just spray luminol on a blood droplet and then you can test it with a light, and it's a bioluminescent type of thing.
Okay. But let me ask you this. If you used a knife to stab somebody and there's blood on it, and then I put tomato paste on top of it, would you still be able to see with the, what did you call it? The testing stuff?
Luminol?
Yeah. Would you still be able to see that?
They would swab them. I mean, they would still take them and swab them.
So even when you clean something off, luminol will still bring up whatever blood was there.
They probably wouldn't be using luminol, because at that point, I mean, they would still probably try to, because they'd probably spray it on the handles, because that was the thing. Like, there would still be blood somewhere on there. They might be able to rinse it off, but it's like when someone washes off. These have to make a point about what type of knives these were, because these weren't like your normal knives. They were the ceramic knives.
Oh.
Yeah. Have you ever used ceramic knives?
No, I know what you're talking about, though. They're not like sharp.
They're super sharp.
Oh.
And they're kind of like plastic texture. So they're not like porous. They don't necessarily absorb like liquids. But I believe that you could still, test them. They would still swab them. So I don't know how it'd work with luminol, but I think they would still probably try to spray them. But I think they would swab them first before they did anything else, to be quite honest. So, yeah.
Okay. So all these knives are just sitting in the sink with tomato paste poured all over them.
Yes. I have no idea. Like, if you're trying to flee, like, you leave a back door open and you're in such a hurry to leave a scene, like, wait, I gotta use the tomato paste. Like, I've never seen this on any crime show or read this in any murder story. And I've read and seen a lot of this stuff. And nothing I learned in school talks about tomato paste as a cure-all for all blood.
Okay, wait, but I do have another question.
Okay.
Did you go through her pantry and see if she even kept tomato paste in her pantry? Because I'm now wondering if somebody like just brought it in because they were premeditated all of this. Like, I'm just going to bring my own tomato paste in. I'm going to get away with the perfect murder.
We always look through people's stuff. We took pictures of everything. I don't remember what all was in there. Think about like mom. Mom has like 50 of everything that is like 10 years old and is like expired in like 2001. So.
Ooh, you just ratted her out. She has been cleaning out her pantry though, so.
Well, it's so funny though, because I see like TikToks come across my feed all the time that like jokes about like stuff that's in your parents' fridge, and you go to take a bite of it and you're like, ugh, what is this? And you look at the expiration date, and it's like 2005. So I'm like, that's relatable. So
Anyway.
Sorry, Mom. I didn't mean it, I swear. Yeah, but I'm sure our mom is not the only one. But, like, I'm sure this lady was a prepper and had all this stuff. So, yeah, her cabinets, were stuffed full of food. If she had little cat knickknacks, what do you think she has in her cabinet?
Fair enough.
So, yeah, that was so weird. So we took pictures, of course, of all the knives. So, I mean, I'm sure that, leads you to believe what happened to her. But there again, it's like, well, I haven't seen her yet. So keep an open mind, right? So by this time, we asked the SI, like, hey, you guys done? And we start walking down the hallway. And they're like, yeah, just be careful. It's like wet down in the hallway. I'm like, what? Why would it be wet? So we're like walking down the hallway and the carpet's like soaked. And I'm like, what the heck? And it's like, as you're like walking.
Was it bloody or just wet?
No, it's like wet water. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I'm like, did they leave like the bathtub running or something to like cover up blood or, whatever? And so I get around the corner and I'm like looking in like the bedroom, like around the corner. This woman had a water bed and the water bed had been stabbed and it leaked. And the other thing, we talk about common sense all the time. These guys had turned on fans in there because, she's old. So the house is like 90 degrees. So they had fans plugged in, box fans on the floor, on the carpet that's wet. And I'm like, I hope we don't all get electrocuted by this water on the floor. And it's like these box fans on the floor and like the mattress is still like actively leaking out.
Okay, so Jeff used to have a waterbed mattress like a long time ago. And I remember when he got rid of it, it was not one piece. It was like multiple tubes. Was her waterbed one piece? Like one big?
It had to have been because it was all draining from one corner.
So, I mean, and then how long does that take? So she couldn't have been dead for too long, right?
It was within the time of 4 hours since she had been pronounced. And when we got there, and we don't know what time it actually happened, and it was still, so where it was stabbed at was in the top of the bed, right? So the water was still sitting in the bottom, but every time it got budged or moved, it was still draining out water, and it was actively draining still. So that's a lot of water in that. So I just remember thinking, like, do you guys have a death wish too? Like, I'd rather be sweating and hot in here working than die of electrocution.
Yeah, no thanks.
So the poor woman, she was so tiny. She was this little woman. Like I said, 82 years old, so tiny. I mean, she had to have been under 5 foot tall. So, she didn't have a chance if anyone broke into her house. And she was actually on the floor of the foot of the bed. And she was actually face down. So she was supine on the floor on the foot of the bed, so close to the door. So it looked like she was actually like trying to hide. So probably went back to her bedroom and tried to shut the door is what we're thinking happened. So when we were looking at her back, because she had like this white kind of nightgown on is kind of what it looked like. It was like white dress. And we could see that she had been like stabbed through the dress, and it was like three spots. And so we know that we've talked about before, it's really hard to stab through ribs, right? Mm-hmm. We've talked about how hard that is because of the cartilage. They weren't like very deep either. And we're just like, well, this isn't enough to kill somebody, even if you are like 82 years old. And so then we turned her over And then we looked, immediately as soon as we turned her over, she had this really deep slit across her throat. It almost beheaded her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, very brutal. And then she had, says 3, 4. And then she had 3 other stabs a little bit lower to the chest, which I don't even know why that was necessary, because it's like it's overkill. So she had 7 stabs total. So yeah, 3 to the back and then 3 more stabs to the chest. And then the one big cut across her throat. I just remember we were both like, oh, like when we flipped her over, I think it all kind of took our breath away, because we weren't expecting such a big gash across her throat. Especially for a little defenseless woman, it almost seems like it's personal at that point when you feel the need to do that to a little elderly person, and probably made them mad that she tried to either hide or get away, and maybe she tried to fight him off or something. So we, of course, when we took her back to lab, we even tested for sexual assault, and because we have no idea what's, going through someone's mind when they decide to kill an elderly little woman. So I know that they did eventually find this man, and I think that he was I don't know if he had attempted to kill multiple people, but we know that he had broken into many homes. But yeah, this was definitely one where it was why? And we know that he had ended up using, it was the biggest ceramic knife. And they said that he had actually ended up cutting his own hands with that knife too, because ceramic knives are so sharp. And because of the blood and the water from the waterbed, as he'd cut through, because he had actually missed hitting her when he had tried stabbing, he'd hit the waterbed, and so it started getting wet. His hand had slipped and he had cut himself. So, which that happens a lot with stabbings. A lot of times people that will stab others, they will actually get cuts on their hands too, because of the blood from their victims. So as they're stabbing, their hands will slide down the knife.
Huh. Yeah, I guess I just didn't think about that. So what was he doing around the neighborhood? Was he the guy that was tormenting people in the neighborhood then?
We're not sure. Probably knew that she was an elderly person, and so that was just an easy target and an easy victim to just prey on. And it's just oh, it's an elderly person, probably watch their routines, and her having a glass sliding door where you can just look into makes her an even easier target, especially if that door isn't locked. So,
but did he take anything?
I don't think he did.
He just went in to kill her. He didn't anything else? Did the sexual assault kit back as positive?
I don't think so. Not that I remember. Gosh, it's been so long ago. I need to go back and look at that case and see what exactly
was his motive
came of that. Yeah. So maybe that's something that we can do.
A Where Are They Now? A second Where Are They Now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can say and maybe I'll just say this now, but I'll say it again. We do know that the Daddy Dearest, if you guys haven't listened to that episode, you can shut it off now, because I did look that gentleman up, the one that killed his daughter, and he is serving a life sentence. So yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah. And then you also found it on another.
Yeah, I found it on another podcast. It was somebody's first podcast episode. I'm not comfortable sharing that just because I don't want to give away anything, but it was so horrible. Anyway, well, I know that we talked about it not being your favorite case or just being an interesting case. And you're right. It's always sad. These are just always sad cases, but I do learn a lot every time we have an episode. I don't know if it's good or bad, but
Yeah. All these things that you put together at the scene. Really, the scene gives you the story, really. When you look at it as a whole. And that's what is so important about being a death investigator, at the scene instead of just bringing in the body. The body tells its own story in itself, right? But, walking in and looking at, the door being left open with the cat food being kicked over, with the blood droplets and the knives in the sink and the water bed with the stab holes in the water bed. I mean, it really tells you a lot about what happened there. If you just look at the pictures of the scene itself, you can really walk through the scene itself with just the pictures of really what happened to her. So that's kind of the beauty of the job as you learn to work cases. And when you get better at it, you learn to really focus on those details too, and to hyper focus on those details even more. And sometimes your boss appreciates that a lot. Sometimes they don't, because you can be on scenes for like 4 hours taking pictures and stuff. And doctors always appreciate that. But other people are like, you need to be on another scene. So in the end, I feel like it always serves its purpose to bring justice to those families when you do your best job on those scenes. So
yeah, I think that's really important. And I think I've always said, like, if something ever happens to me like that, I would want somebody like you to investigate my death, because I want somebody who pays attention to detail. I know my husband always says, like, the details don't matter, but they do matter. And
yes,
they matter for certain reasons. Maybe not for everybody, but this is the type of job where, details matter. So, well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I remember you saying it could have been a murder mystery type. The tomato paste. What a dummy.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to know what was said in the interview room when they're like, so can you tell us, as they're flipping the picture around and they scoot it towards him, like, what was the purpose of this?
I just think it seemed like he was in a hurry. And then at the end, like, you left the door open.
DNA.
Yeah.
He probably thought he'd get rid of DNA on the weapon. And it's like literally touch DNA. So touch DNA literally is like, you can get one single tiny skin cell from literally just touching a surface of something. Touch DNA has just advanced greatly within, just 20 years. It's crazy. It doesn't take much. So
yeah,
don't be a dum-dum.
Don't be a dum-dum. and if you are, go back and listen to our Don't Be a Dum-Dum episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have any questions for Amy, or you want to hear about any other cases, you can email us at kelly@diaryofadeathinvestigator.com, or you can message us on our Instagram page, Diary of a Death Investigator. And until next time,
bye.